This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2009, along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2009. We also look at the case for putting Sonic Youth into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and our Spotlight Walk of Fame is the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, California. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. The year was 2009. In music, the major story was the death of Michael Jackson. BET did a tribute to him, which was passable at best. It was overshadowed earlier in the day, though, when Michael's father, Joe, didn't talk about his son during interviews, but rather he pushed his new music project that he was doing. Family love. The MTV Video Music Awards also paid him a tribute with a performance by Janet Jackson and a speech by Madonna, but even that was all overshadowed by the now infamous Kanye West interrupting Taylor Swift's speech incident. At a White House event celebrating poetry, Lin-Manuel Miranda tried out an idea he had by rapping about Alexander Hamilton. The response that he received inspired him to flesh out his idea some more, and that idea became the blockbuster Broadway sensation Hamilton. EDM started to become more mainstream, mainly due to David Guetta helping to produce the Black Eyed Peas album, making way for other artists to want to work with EDM producers, and led to the EDM explosion only a couple of years later. Other dance hits besides the Black Eyed Peas' I Got a Feelin' and Boom Boom Pow were LaRose Bulletproof, Cascada's Evacuate the Dance Floor, Fedde Le Grand's classic dance track Put Your Hands Up for Detroit, David Guetta's Memories and also Sexy Bitch, Boys Noise Jeffer, Christine W's Be Alright, while Lady Gaga owned the dance floor with 4 hits. In hip-hop, it was the year of beef as 50 Cent and Rick Ross, Beanie Sigel and 50 Cent versus Jay-Z, Method Man and Joe Budden, Young Jeezy and DJ Drama, Trina and Kia, and Soulja Boy and Bow Wow decided to go at it because no one learned from the Tupac-Biggie beef back in the 90s, of course. How'd that turn out? For instance, Joe Budden was physically attacked by Method Man's fellow Wu-Tang Clan member Raekwon a few months after their beef had started. Bunch of idiots. Ending beef that year, however, were The Game and 50 Cent, while Soulja Boy tried to end his beef with the New Boys. Musically, Drake released his mixtape, So Far Gone, which had Best I Ever Had on it. Eminem's Crack a Bottle and Flo Rida's Right Round both hit number 1, but the biggest and probably most enduring hip-hop song from 2009 was Jay-Z and Alicia Keys' New York City anthem, Empire State of Mind. Other hits were Jay-Z and Rihanna's Run This Town and Kid Cudi's Day and Night. Big albums that year were released by Eminem, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Rick Ross, Young Money, Jadakiss, Kid Cudi, Fabulous, Gucci Mane, and UGK. In country music, Garth Brooks came out of his self-imposed exile to start a 5-year Las Vegas residency. Having big hits in 2009 were Sugarland, Lady Antebellum, now called Lady A, Kenny Chesney, Toby Keith, Darius Rucker, Jason Aldean, Alan Jackson, Carrie Underwood, Rascal Flatts, George Strait, Blake Shelton, Keith Urban, and the Zac Brown Band. Bands who formed in 2009 included AWOL Nation, Basement, Diddy Dirty Money, Duck Sauce, Foster the People, Icona Pop, 21 Pilots, Nick Jonas and the Organization, and Zed's Dead. Bands that broke up in 2009 included All Saints, Love and Rockets, Live, Blue Cheer, Danity Kane, Divinyls, EMF, Oasis, Peter, Paul and Mary, Fall Out Boy, Hanoi Rocks, The Verve, Violent Femmes, Stereolab, and Escape. Bands that either reunited or came back from extended breaks included the Bee Gees, Blink-182, Cinderella, Creed, The Cranberries, Faith No More, House of Pain, Johnny Hates Jazz, Mott the Hoople, Mr. Big, Fish, The Plastic Ono Band, Public Image Limited, Skunk Anansi, Spandau Ballet, Wang Chung, Sublime, and the Jacksons. Aside from Michael Jackson, other major music deaths included guitarist Ron Asheton of the Stooges, guitar great Les Paul, DJ AM, Billy Powell of Lynyrd Skynyrd, Dan Seals, Wayman Tisdale, blues great Coco Taylor, singer Al Martino, Avenged Sevenfold founder The Rev, singer Vic Chestnut, singer Carla Boney, singer Stephen Gately of Boyzone, singer Taylor Mitchell, singer Mercedes Sosa, DJ Rock Rada, singer Willie DeVille, drummer Uriel Jones of Motown's house band The Funk Brothers, Randy Kane of the Delphonics, Bob Bogle of The Ventures, rapper Dalla, Steve Ferguson of NRBQ, opera singer Shapey Pugh, singer Vern Gosdin, composer Maurice Jarre, singer Elaine Bashung, singer Hank Lachlan, Lux Interior of The Cramps, Dewey Martin of Buffalo Springfield, and Mary Travers of Peter, Paul and Mary. The biggest album of the year in America was Taylor Swift's Fearless. The biggest album of the year worldwide was by Britain's Got Talent contestant Susan Boyle. Other big albums were by U2, Lady Gaga, Eminem, Michael Bublé, Andrea Bocelli, Jay-Z, the Black Eyed Peas, Kings of Leon, the Hannah Montana soundtrack, and 3 of Michael Jackson's albums. Because death is always a great career move, you're just not around to enjoy the benefits of it. Michael Jackson was the biggest selling artist of the year, selling 35 million copies of his albums worldwide right after his death, along with his documentary, This Is It, becoming the biggest documentary of all time, making over $250 million. 2009 was also Lady Gaga's coming out party, with 3 of the biggest hits of the year being Just Dance, Telephone, and Poker Face. The Black Eyed Peas also had a big year with Boom Boom Pow and also I Got a Feelin'. Other best-selling singles of 2009 included Beyoncé's Single Ladies, Taylor Swift's Love Story and You Belong With Me, Flo Rida's Right Round, Jason Mraz's I'm Yours, Kanye's Heartless, and the All-American Rejects' Give You Hell. At the Grammy Awards, Taylor Swift's Fearless won Album of the Year, making her, at the age of 20, the youngest winner of the award. Record of the Year went to Kings of Leon's Use Somebody. Beyoncé won Song of the Year for Single Ladies, and the Zac Brown Band won Best New Artist. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Beyoncé won Video of the Year for Single Ladies. At the American Music Awards, Taylor Swift won Artist of the Year. The Billboard Music Awards weren't held that year. In fact, they weren't held between 2007 to 2010. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held in Moscow, Russia, Norway won for the song Fairy Tale. At the Tony Awards, Billy Elliot, the musical, won Best Musical, and Hair won Best Revival of a Musical. Steve Reich's piece, A Double Sextet, won the Pulitzer Prize for Music. For Academy Awards music, the soundtrack to Up won Best Film Score, and The Weary Kind from Crazy Heart won Best Song. At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, bass guitarist Bill Black, drummer DJ Fontana, and keyboardist Spooner Oldham were inducted into the Sidemen category. It was the final year of the Sidemen category, as the category was expanded upon in 2010 and became the Award for Musical Excellence category. In the Early Influencers category, the Hall inducted Wanda Jackson, and in the Performers category, the Hall inducted Metallica, Bobby Womack, Jeff Beck, Run DMC, and this next artist. In the 1950s, doo-wop music ruled the music landscape, and every guy thought that singing in a doo-wop group was their way to fame and fortune. In Brooklyn, New York, that reality was no different. In fact, it was probably even more so, as it seemed that there were a bunch of harmonizing guys on virtually every street corner in the city. In one particular part of Brooklyn was a group called the Chesters. The group originally consisted in 1957 of group founder Clarence Collins, Tracy Lord, Nathaniel Rogers, and Ronald Ross. Also in Brooklyn was a group called the DuPonts, who had a singer at one time called Anthony Gorine. He was recruited to become the Chesters' lead singer. Ronald Ross left the group soon thereafter and was replaced by Ernest Wright. They started out recording for Apollo Records before switching to End Records in 1958. At that point, they changed their name from the Chesters to the Imperials. Their first release, Tears on My Pillow, became a huge hit and an instant classic. They followed that up with hits Two People in the World and Shimmy Shimmy Cocoa Pop. Then, because they didn't have a hit song for about 6 months or so, Anthony Gorine, better known as Little Anthony, got lead singer syndrome and decided that he was better off as a solo artist. The timing of that decision rocked the group, as Rogers had to leave the group because he was drafted into the military and Lord left to get married. The three who left were replaced by Sammy Strain and George Kerr. Kerr ended up leaving and was replaced by Kenny Seymour. And as it turns out, neither the new lineup nor Little Anthony and his lead singer Syndrome had any success without each other. So Anthony came back. Out went Seymour, and the now classic lineup of Little Anthony, Collins, Wright, and Strain was solidified. They went over to Don Costa Productions, hooked up with their friend, producer Teddy Randazzo, and their careers took off again during the rest of the 1960s. They had hits like Going Out of My Head, Hurt So Bad, I'm on the Outside Looking In, Better Use Your Head, Hurt, and Take Me Back. During the 1970s, the group started to lose members as they shifted from record label to record label until the classic lineup wasn't really a part of the group anymore. Little Anthony left again, this time having a much better time as a solo artist. In 1992, the classic lineup got back together for a concert at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The reunion proved to be such a success that they decided to tour together again. To this day, the group does still perform, although Clarence Collins retired from touring. Their songs have been covered many, many times, and they hold the distinction of being one of the few doo-wop groups to find success on both the soul and pop charts during the 1960s. Presented for induction by 1987 Rock Hall inductee Smokey Robinson of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Little Anthony and the Imperials. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2009. Before we get to the rest of the podcast, we'd like to tell you about our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast. Every day we tell you what happened on that date in music history, along with music releases, birthdays, and passings. So, if you like this podcast and want more music history, then please search the Music History Today podcast in audio or video form on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. This week, we take a look at putting Sonic Youth into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. To the tail of the tape we go. Sonic Youth had 15 studio albums, starting in 1983 with Confusion Is Sex and ending in 2009 with The Eternal. Of those 15 albums, the last 10 charted, starting with 1990's Goo before ending their careers with their highest charted album, The Eternal, at number 18. They only had 5 singles chart in America. 1988's Teenage Riot hit number 20. 1990's Cool Thing hit number 7. 1992's 100% hit number 4, 1994's Bull in the Heather hit number 13 with its follow-up single Superstar hitting number 26. Their chart success doesn't make them hall-worthy, though. What does is that they help to influence a few rock genres. The group started out in New York City as a no-wave rock band, not new wave, but no-wave. They then helped to influence indie rock, noise rock, and alternative rock music. They did it by essentially messing around with the guitar by changing the guitar's timbre with things like drumsticks. They also tuned the guitar strangely to give it that noisy sound that especially helped to influence grunge music. With their influence over what became the driving force of music in the 1990s, will that actually earn them a place in the hall? My thought is eventually, yes. However, it's not going to happen anytime soon. The history of the hall voters says that they probably won't even make it onto a list of consideration for at least another decade or so. The way I think of it is this. The group T-Rex influenced late 60s and early 70s glam rock. It took until 2020 for them to finally make it into the hall. Figure that the hall voters who grew up on 90s music won't be entrenched into the majority of the voting camp for at least another decade, maybe even 2. Therefore, they'll go through the popular 90s bands first before they get to the bands who really influenced 90s music, like the Pixies and Sonic Youth. Do Sonic Youth deserve to be in? Oh, absolutely. Their influence on 90s music, however subtle it may look to the general public, cannot be ignored. Sonic Youth deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There are many walks of fame in the world. There's the Aerospace Walk of Honor in Lancaster, California, the Almeria Walk of Fame in Almeria, Spain, the Australian Film Walk of Fame in Sydney, Australia. However, when you think of walks of fame, you really only think of one. It is the most famous walk of fame of them all. It's the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, California. The idea for the walk was dreamed up by E.M. Stewart, who was president of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce in 1953. People think that the idea for having stars came from the Hollywood Hotel, which had stars on the ceiling of their dining room. The final parameters for the project were agreed upon in 1955 and presented to the Los Angeles City Council in 1956. Construction for the walk started in 1958 and ended in 1960. There were 8 people who were supposed to be given stars first: Olive Borden, Ronald Colman, Louise Franzenda, Preston Foster, Burt Lancaster, Edward Sedgwick, Ernest Torrance, and Joanne Woodward. However, director Stanley Kramer is credited with having his star installed on the actual Walk of Fame first on March 28, 1960. Popular myth is that Joanne Woodward was the first star, but she was the first person to be photographed posing with her star, so that myth is kind of stuck over the decades. The walk covers 1.3 miles down Hollywood Boulevard with a few side streets added as space permits. As of the beginning of 2020, there were 2,690 stars. The stars are awarded in 5 different categories: film, television, theater plus live performance, radio, and music. For our podcast, we're only going to be dealing with artists who were awarded in at least the radio and music categories. People who get stars have to pay $50,000 for the upkeep of the star. Every year, the Chamber of Commerce gets over 200 names for consideration for a star, but only 20 to 24 stars are awarded during a normal year. There has only been one star that was not put on a sidewalk: Muhammad Ali, because he didn't want it to be walked on because he was a champion. He was inducted into the theater/live performance category, and his star is on a wall at Hollywood and Highland at 6801 Hollywood Boulevard. There have also been special stars given out to people who were part of the Hollywood community, such as former Los Angeles mayor, the late Tom Bradley, and honorary mayor of Hollywood and the guy most associated with promoting the Walk of Fame, the late Johnny Grant. There have been stars given out as well to people who were not entertainers but had done important things, such as the crew of Apollo 11. Usually, those stars are put in the live performance category. There have been two presidents who were given stars, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Reagan was given one for his radio and acting career, and Trump because of his TV show The Apprentice. Only one star so far in the history of the Walk of Fame has ever been considered officially for removal from the Walk of Fame, Donald Trump's. As of yet, no final decision has been made about removing it. Politics, you know. What's going on? Sexual healing. How sweet it is to be loved by you. Those are just three of the songs that our next artist made famous, and while it seemed to the public that he lived a charmed life, behind the scenes, it was anything but charmed. The same demons that controlled many other artists controlled him as well, and his death, or rather the way he died, was one of the most shocking moments in music history. Marvin Gaye was born on April 2nd, 1939 in Washington, D.C. His father was a minister while his mother was a domestic worker. He enjoyed singing from a young age when he started singing in his father's church. His father was also extremely strict and would beat Marvin over any childhood transgression. Marvin went into the Air Force after high school. He didn't like how strict it was, so he faked mental illness and got a general discharge. He returned to Washington, where he formed a singing group called the Marquis. While performing around the D.C. area, they came in contact with Bo Diddley, who got them signed to one of Columbia Records' smaller labels. When their first single failed to become a hit, they were unfortunately dropped. Right around that time, there was a group called the Moonglows. The co-founder of the Moonglows, Harvey Fuqua, liked the Marquis sound and signed them to an employee's contract. They moved the group to Chicago, where they worked as session singers while recording their own material, which was when Marvin started writing songs. During a performance at the home of Berry Gordy, who was the head of Motown Records, Berry noticed Marvin's talent and arranged with Fuqua for Marvin to join the Motown family. Marvin's Motown career started off slowly. He was a session drummer who was trying to get his records to sell at the same time. His debut album, The Soulful Moods of Marvin Gaye, flopped miserably. It wasn't until 1962 that things started clicking for him. Late in 1962, he released his first solo hit, Stubborn Kind of Fellow. Things started humming after that. Hit after hit started coming his way. He started doing duet albums. His first one with Mary Wells was a big hit. He had the hit It Takes Two with Kim Weston. He also had a bunch of hits with Tammy Terrell, including Ain't No Mountain High Enough and Your Precious Love. During a performance together in 1967, though, Tammy collapsed on stage into Marvin's arms. Tammy, as it turns out, was suffering from a brain tumor. She would have multiple operations and would quit live performing. She would then later pass away from brain cancer in 1970. Her illness and death affected Marvin greatly. Marvin recorded the song What's Going On, but Berry Gordy thought that it was too political. Marvin stopped recording in protest until Motown released both the song and the album. And both the song and the album would go on to become huge hits and are now considered to be some of the greatest music ever to be recorded, making many a best of all time list, including Rolling Stone magazine's greatest albums of all time list, now the #1 greatest album of all time. It was at that point that Marvin knew that eventually he would have to gain more creative control over his music. By the time he recorded his last album for Motown in 1978, things were not going so well for Marvin. First, he was getting divorced. Second, he was dealing with the IRS over back taxes. And third, and possibly most important, he was dealing with that old musical demon, drugs, specifically cocaine. To escape everything, Marvin went to Europe. When Motown released his last album with them, Marvin realized that they changed the mixing and the editing. He was furious, vowing never to do another album with them. In 1982, Motown released Marvin from his contract. He then ended up at CBS Records, where he recorded his comeback album, Midnight Love, with the smash hit Sexual Healing. During the tour for that album, he became more and more dependent upon cocaine. He had gotten sober for a time when he was in Europe, and it looked like he would be fine, but it was not to be, unfortunately. Things got so bad that when he moved back to Los Angeles, California, he moved back in with his parents, who had also relocated to Los Angeles. A very big mistake, as it turns out. Remember, Marvin and his father had a really bad relationship. Marvin even added the E to his last name of Gay, G-A-Y, in part to get people, of course, to stop making fun of his last name, but to also symbolically get further away from his dad. Marvin decided, though, that after all those years, that he wanted to make peace with his dad. For Christmas in 1983, Marvin gave his dad a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber handgun to use as protection. Big mistake number 2. The drugs had made Marvin suicidal and paranoid. He attempted to commit suicide on March 28, 1984 by jumping in front of a car, but he only got a few bruises from that. Also during that time, Marvin's parents were arguing a lot, mainly over some missing insurance papers. On April 1st, 1984, Marvin's parents argued over those papers yet again. Marvin tried protecting his mother when his dad came upstairs to confront his mother. Marvin pushed his dad out of the room, told him not to come back in, beat him, and punched him. Marvin followed his dad into his dad's bedroom, still kicking and beating him. Marvin's mother pulled him away and told him to go back to his room. A few minutes later, Marvin's father came back upstairs and went to Marvin's room. He opened the door. In his hand was that gun that Marvin had given his father that Christmas before to protect himself. Marvin's dad pointed the gun at his own son and fired twice. Once hitting Marvin in his heart, and once hitting him in his left shoulder. Marvin Gaye passed away less than an hour later, one day before his 45th birthday. His father would be tried for murder, but once it was determined that he acted in self-defense, he was given a 6-month suspended sentence and 5 years probation. Marvin's father passed away in 1998 in a nursing home. As with a lot of sudden deaths, there's also a conspiracy theory. This one says that Marvin wanted to commit suicide but couldn't do it himself, especially after failing only a few days before when he jumped in front of that speeding car and actually surviving the attempt. The conspiracy theory goes that Marvin purposely enraged his father, knowing that his father would kill him, as his father had stated many, many times that if a child ever raised his hand to him, he would kill them. Most parents are only half kidding when they say that. Not Marvin's dad. I'm not sure if Marvin did do that, and the fact is, honestly, we're never going to know. We only have witness reports to go by. What we do know was that the world was completely shocked. I think most people would have believed a drug overdose, and maybe even the suicide might have been a little less shocking, but getting shot by your own father? Now that was a new one. On MTV's Most Shocking Things to Happen in Music list, Marvin's death ranks in at number 8. John Lennon's death ranks in at number 1. Located at 1500 Vine Street on the corner with Sunset Boulevard and in front of the Chase Bank, you'll find Marvin Gaye's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And that is it for this episode of the Music Halls of Fame podcast. For more podcast episodes, which drop every Thursday in audio and video form, then please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, CastBox, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast from.